Hello and welcome to Cymera, Britain's only book festival celebrating science fiction, fantasy and horror writing. My name is Anne Landman and I'm the festival's founder and artistic director. Right about now, I'd hope to be welcoming you to beautiful Edinburgh, to our venue The Pleasance, for a weekend packed with events. Writing workshop, panels, readings, open mics, a quiz, a ceilidh, 2 plays. We had so much in store for you. Thank you for joining us online instead, to be part of our programme from the safety of your homes. We're very excited to still bring you a fantastic lineup of speakers. We'd ask you that you support our speakers, and there's many ways you can do that. You can buy their books or borrow them from the library. You can donate to them directly via their Patreon or Ko-fi. You will find the links for that below in the description. We encourage you to buy a ticket for our events, even the pre-recorded ones. All ticket money will go directly to our speakers. You can also donate to the festival, and all donations via the donation page will be split between our speakers, once we've covered our costs like the Zoom account. Thank you again for joining us in this brave new world of digital events. We hope you have a chance to check out all 33 of ours over the weekend. Please let us know what you think of them. Do get in touch via social media, the chat function in Zoom, or drop us an email on info@chimerafestival.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in person next year for Cymera 2021.
Good afternoon and welcome to Cymera Festival. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Eleanor Pender. I am joined by the wonderful Phil Cavaney, Caroline Logan and Melinda Salisbury in various squares around my square. Welcome to the new Cymera digital programme for 2020. So just to let everyone know, for the next approximate 50 minutes, we are going to be talking about spooky Scotia. It's very lovely books inspired by Scotland that we all know and love, because it's Cymera, so you know. If you don't love Scotland, you're probably in the wrong Zoom meeting. Phil, sorry Phil, I know I'm calling you Phil, but just to not confuse everyone, Danny Weston, if you are looking for Danny Weston, you are in the right event. Phil Cavaney writes also under the name of Danny Weston, whose debut novel, The Piper, won the Scottish Children's Book Award in 2016. Your third book here, The Haunting of Jessup Bryce, was shortlisted for the Scottish Teenage Book Award. And your latest novel, see prop here, is set in the 1950s and tells the story of a boy and his mother marooned on a supposedly uninhabited island. You've also published many of the titles. Is it just under Phil, or do you have any other pseudonyms that we should know about?
Those are the two I admit to. I have a female pseudonym that I'm not allowed to reveal because I signed the confidentiality agreement with the publishers. So I have sometimes female as well.
Okay.
Imagine if it was Melinda Salisbury and I was just a beard, like my face.
That would be weird, wouldn't
Imagine.
Imagine. Thanks, Mark, because Melinda Salisbury, who's also joined us there, lovely cup of tea, is the twice Carnegie-nominated and best-selling author of multiple young adult novels, including the Sin Eater's Daughter series, The State of Sorrow duology, and Hold Back the Tide, which I have on my Kindle here, trying to make sure that that's not shining. Hope everyone can see that. It is a beautiful cover. My Kindle does not do it justice. Oh, you have, she has a physical copy. I'm sorry, Mel, I didn't get a physical copy. It was back when social distancing was super important.
These plague times, we do what we can.
Yeah.
You are a passionate, this is according to your biography, you are a passionate vegan, a bad mother to many plants, and you like to travel when you can.
Yeah, I used to like travel, now I really like staying home. No, I love staying home. That's my
Love
favorite.
it. It's your best, it's your favorite. Caroline is a writer of young adult fantasy. Your debut novel, The Stone of Destiny, here we go, is the first in the 4 Treasures series. Are there 4 books in the series? Not.
Yeah, so the next one I've just finished writing out in October, and then I think I'm contracted for one every year.
She's like,
yeah.
Cauldron of Life.
Sorry?
Cauldron of Life?
Yep, the next one.
Next bit.
Yeah, and I've just started doing the outline for the third one as well. So
this is the downside of chairing. I get given books to chair, and then I get hooked on multiple series. Then I have to buy all the sequels. It's terrible.
yeah.
Mel, I think I have all of your books for that exact reason, but there we go. For Caroline, you were also a high school biology teacher.
Yeah. So I think school just finished for us there. So on a Friday we finished a little bit early. Not that probably any of the kids are going to be working today because it is so nice outside. They can just go and enjoy the sunshine.
I love that apparently it is warmer in Scotland than it is, because I'm coming to you from Bristol, which is known for being very sunny, but apparently it is not as warm here as it is in Scotland. Scotland is beating us today.
Mm-hmm.
Before moving to the Cairngorms National Park, you lived in Spain, Tenerife, Sri Lanka, and in lots of other places in Scotland.
Yeah. I'm quite glad to be back in Scotland though, to be honest. Yeah, I was teaching in Spain for a year, and in Sri Lanka and Tenerife I was working as a conservation assistant, I guess. But you got paid in food.
Got paid in food. Well, I mean, you know, that can be helpful. It means there's one less thing I suppose you have to worry about there. So how have you all been in the last few, I was going to say weeks, it's not weeks anymore, it's months now.
Yeah.
I want to say surviving, basically, you know, just rubbing along. Particularly since I spend all my spare time in cinemas, in theatres, and in restaurants, not an awful lot to be going on with there.
Yeah,
I think I've realised that I can keep myself pretty busy in the house actually. So I must have quite a few hobbies that are very like in the middle of the house, in the middle of nowhere. I guess because it's really hard for us to get anywhere to a big city anyway. So been doing a lot of reading and writing and weaving and playing with the dog. So
you weave? Like what scale are you talking? Like
I got one of these like little weaving whatever they're called. Yeah, that's the one. As you can tell, I'm not an expert.
I was this close to buying a mini loom yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you have enough things to play with. Don't buy anything else.
Well, they're quite good. So I play Dungeons and Dragons on a Saturday. So they're quite good to kind of keep your hands busy doing something as you're listening to the story that's going on. So I've been trying that.
Very nice. You've been getting crafty as well, haven't you, Mel?
They've learned loads of new skills. There was all this furore online about, you don't need to learn new skills now. It's like, oh, but I might as well, in case I need them for the barter system that's going to come after society collapses. I've learned how to make pom-poms. I learned origami. I learned how to knit in the round using double-ended needles. I can use 4 at a time. I learned a whole new casting on stitch. I've been doing baking, planting.
I mean, you already make.
I mean, I was doing all this stuff before, like apart from the new stuff I've learned, like it's not.
Apart from the pom poms.
Yeah, then oh god, I hate them. I hate them so much.
For anyone who doesn't know, Mel declared at the beginning of lockdown that she would do a pom pom a day, and then I think round about day 21, you were like, "Why have I done this? I'm now drowning in pom poms."
I got to day 64, but then I was like, I'm going to swap out and do origami instead because I just have an awful lot of pom-poms and I had no idea what to do with them. You cover them in vodka and burn them, I think, like ceremonially.
I saw a video about how to make pom-pom bunting, so I'm sure there's a way you could do that.
I'm going to do some wreaths.
Nice.
But there's only so many wreaths you can make before.
Hey, that's what Etsy's for. Mel has an Etsy store, which also includes signed copies of her books and other lovely items that she has created. She did this before lockdown. It's very, very nice. Well, we should probably talk about the lovely books.
How are you? What have you been doing?
Oh, thanks, Mel. I'm good. I work freelance and also part-time lecture. So for me, it was getting my students through the end of their course and helping them to submit their work. So it was pretty much that, and then gradually my other work, which is based in the creative arts and event industry, kind of gradually faded and decreased into the background. So yeah, just really focusing on the uni stuff, and it's been marking really, Cymera reading, marking, and yeah, the reason why I said no to a loom is that I gave myself permission to to get back into watercolor, so I've been painting, and I'm like, not the cheapest of extracurricular activities, I should add. But yeah, so I've been trying to do a bit more of that.
Oh, do you know, it would have been fun if you'd have done some kind of Chris Riddell thing where you painted as you were chairing, and then at the end you'd held up a picture of all of us.
Yes, though it wouldn't look anything like Chris Riddell's style, and you'd be lucky to try and work out which one was you and which one was Phil.
Abstract.
I like doing floral patterns, and I can do like lines and layers with watercolor, but people have always been something that it's not my forte. So people are going to wonder what they're talking about. Yeah, well, this is a craft session. Get crafty with Cymera. Let us move on to our lovely books. Melinda, would you please introduce us to the world of Hold Back the Tide? And we're going to try and keep this event as spoiler-free as possible. To be fair, it's actually really difficult to talk about all of your books without revealing really significant plot points. I'll be guided by your instructions. So over to you, Mel.
Well, Hold Back the Tide is set in a fictional town in the very, very North Highlands of Scotland. I think the closest, it's miles, like much further north than Inverness. And it is set kind of at the turn of the last century, not the one just gone, the one before. Wow, God, we're old.
You mean like the 1900s?
Yeah, the 1900s.
Okay.
That's a much better way of saying it. So it's set around then, and it's set in a town where industry is kind of just up and coming. So there's now kind of a burgeoning paper industry there. And what that paper industry is doing is using up a lot of natural resources that the community relies on. But unfortunately, this random white man has decided that industry and money is slightly more important than, I don't know, the lives of other people. It's almost like it's a parallel to something. I don't know. I'll have to come back to it.
We'll have to explore that at some point.
Yeah, something that needs to be explored, I think. And it is about a teenage girl called Alva, whose father is responsible for maintaining the lock, and who has a very bad relationship with this man of industry. And it is super hard to talk about what happens.
Then stuff happens.
And some things happen, and it is way more interesting. It's not like a Naomi Klein expose on industry in the north of Scotland in the 1900s. It is a kind of eco thriller, a little horror, a little romance, a little sprinkling of everything. Just it's 83p on Kindle. Just what have you got to lose? Have a go.
I know, that is a steal. Anyone who hasn't got it yet, and it's now the beginning of June, 83p on Kindle, get over there. So that's
my publicist is not going to love that pitch.
Sorry, Mel's publicist. She means it in the best of intentions. So just to kind of build on what you were saying there, the lock is pretty much, was it fair to say that's like the heart and the center of the story? It features really, really heavily in the.
It's all but a character of itself. It
is a character of itself. I did have
serious body of water. That so much of the story and the lives of the people in the story kind of focus and center around.
What led you to set a story in Scotland and around a lock? Because everything beforehand has been kind of far more fantastical.
My gran was Scottish. She's MacLeod. I've always had that kind of horrible American attitude of, oh, I'm part Scottish. Sorry, Americans. And I go up there often. I have one of my very good friends, the guy who the book's dedicated to, lives in Cupar in Fife. And so I would go up and see him. And I went up for Christmas one year, and we decided, well, for my Christmas treat, he was going to take me all around Culloden and up into the Highlands to kind of see more of Scotland than just Fife and Edinburgh. And we went out on the way up, and we went through Loch Ness, and I am very bad at understanding how large spaces are, and so I couldn't imagine the sheer scale and size of Loch Ness. And I think once you see it in person, you can understand why people would believe there were things in there, why scientists would like seriously investigate the possibility that there are ancient mythic almost monsters in there, because it's so vast and so deep and just goes on. And while we were there standing at the edge, it's just like, God, you get a lot of mileage out of something like this, which is unknown but at the same time unknown. And then I'd had the seeds already for the plot of Hold Back the Tide, but I didn't really have a place for it yet. And for a while it was going to be a fiction, one of my classic knock up a world in 7 days god jobs, but instead what I decided to do was set it in actual Scotland. So I borrowed Loch Ness and transplanted it much further north and gave it a whole new name and a slightly different location and a different life.
So, I mean, water is actually a theme for all of you, and the natural environment. You're all incredibly inspired by Scotland. It pretty much lives and breathes in all of the novels that we have today. How did you, Phil, first, how did you just, I mean, I know you live in Edinburgh, and the Firth of Forth, which is referenced very early on in the novel, in terms of the actual place where you would set Inchin. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's close enough for me. Inchin, yeah.
Inchin, okay. So wanted to make should have asked that question before we started, shouldn't I? How did you go about creating the kind of landscape for your island? Because it's not a real island, is it?
It's not a real island, but it does embody elements from quite a few of the islands in the Firth of Forth. And there's a story, I mean, I'll tell you exactly what gave me the idea for this book. I was on a train and I was going across the Forth Bridge, as it was, on the train. Sitting opposite me were two people I didn't know, two guys, and one of them nudged the other one and pointed out of the window over the side of the bridge and said, "Look down there, that's the old Leper Island." And my ears shut up and I thought, Leper Island? No, surely not. In Scotland? So of course, as soon as I got home, I researched it, and yes, you know, islands were used as places to sort of isolate those with the contagion. And the contagion could be all kinds. It could be bubonic plague, could be typhoid, smallpox, all kinds of things. So that was the spark, I think, that created the idea for the story. And I immediately started set it in the 1950s because I didn't want there to be mobile phones and things. This is about a boy called Noah, and despite that name, he's terrified of water, mostly because of a bullying incident at his boarding school in England. And he has to get in a little boat and travel out to this island a mile or so offshore, and it's pretty much uninhabited, or so he thinks, and spend the entire time there. Of course, once you're trapped on a little island, when there aren't such things as mobile phones, you're in a bit of a predicament, aren't you? And it's all about this boy having to conquer the greatest fear he has, and that's fear of water.
It's interesting that you made that deliberate intention to set it in the 1950s, to remove electronic devices, and take us, you know, back to that slightly different era. And there's something about Noah and the fact that the only thing left to him is exploring this natural environment, exploring what is both there from nature but also has been left behind. And it definitely brings up all those very well-known mystical elements and kind of magical creatures that are so dominant in Scottish folklore. And you drew on a few of those, but there's such a wealth that you could have explored.
There are, and I mean, I as I write as two people, I mean, a lot of the Philip Caveny books are. I first came to Scotland, I mean, only a few years ago. I've lived here 4 years now, and before that, I didn't know much about the place. And I went to Mary King's Close in Edinburgh. It's an amazing place where they had the bubonic plague in 1645. And I was there with my wife, and I said, I'm going to set a book here. This place is amazing. And that became a trilogy of books. And since then, I have, I mean, there's a whole wealth of folklore to draw from Scottish history, historical incidents, and it's a treasure trove, really, which I am gleefully pillaging to to my best extent. And there's plenty more there, you know. So it's been great. And one of the wonderful things, like Mel said, is about exploring different parts of the country. When you live in Edinburgh, you know Edinburgh really well, and then you start to move a bit further afield, and we've been all over into the Isle of Skye, and we've been out to Arran, and it's just such a beautiful country, and there's so much inspiration there for any writer.
Speaking of treasures to explore, it's a very helpful turn of phrase you used there, Phil, because it leads seamlessly to Caroline, who has written the 4 Treasures series. You almost certainly draw on the you know, the fairies and selkies and all the other different brilliant kind of magical creatures that are so dominant in Scottish stories. Where did you start when you really were thinking about those different ideas?
So I think that originally when I started writing Destiny, it was just for me. I was just looking to have a go at writing something, because I had been reading lots of books, and I kind of noticed that there were kind of like bits and pieces of kind of Scottish folklore, but not a book that was particularly set there. Actually, I'm kind of fangirling a little bit, because one of the series that I read just before I wrote The Son of Destiny was Cymera's Daughter. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, be cool.
We've all been.
Yeah, we've all been there. So yeah, there's so many really great stories. I just wanted to kind of mainly focus on Scotland, and originally I was going to write a historical fantasy, but then that was just going to be too difficult to kind of research. So I wanted my characters to wear kilts, for example, but then where the setting was going to be, they didn't actually have kilts. So I just decided to make it all up.
Yeah, you can have kilts.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's drawn inspiration from Scotland, and even I think a lot of kind of present day things from like where I grew up in Glasgow. It's kind of like sprinkled throughout the whole book. And then yeah, that's the
that map illustration. Who doesn't love a good map?
Yeah.
The map. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Don't get out. The map illustration. It says here it was done by Caroline Logan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was gonna pay someone to do it, and then, I just thought, oh, maybe I'll just do it myself.
Love it.
Yeah, it was edited by my publisher, so she has some really good Photoshop skills. But yeah, lots of just like YouTube videos, and I kind of taught myself how to do it.
So I didn't mean to break your flow there. It was just a way of being able to demonstrate. You're talking, oh, I've taken Scottish influences and here's the world. And I was like, yeah, but it's actually quite extensive. You've got so many islands, and I appreciate they reference a few in book 1, and I'm guessing that we explore a bit more of the world in the books to come. But yeah, it's really, I find it really fascinating to see where an author's head might be moving towards when you've got a map. Love a map. Sorry.
Yeah. I've got the whole series plotted out. I did right at the beginning, so
nice. So you always knew. Okay.
I always knew that we were going to be kind of going to other places, and Elanmore is based on Scotland, but then maybe books we might see some of the other places like Mirandel, which is kind of south. It's kind of based on like Venetian kind of like, I guess, 17th century. So yeah, there's just like a lot of kind of fun things to explore. That's what I like about fantasy. It's just you can kind of just make it up as you go along, and it's just fun.
Just make it up.
Yeah.
Caroline, would you mind sharing a short reading from Stone of Destiny with us?
Yeah. I just had to text my partner because the book was upstairs. He had to like sneak in. I've been using the map at the front for book 2 writing, so that's why it was upstairs. Okay, so we shall go for this one because I cannot Alec, so we'll go for one that doesn't have any. Okay, chapter 1. Ailsa tilted her head towards the sky and let the rain wash away the blood from her face and arms. The sun still had an hour before it would sink below the horizon. It had been a fortuitous day. Not only had she managed to get a fire started in the damp cave mouth in less than 2 minutes, she'd also stumbled upon a deer that had fallen to its doom over the cliff edge, its neck twisted. She'd immediately set to work butchering it and stuffing the cut-offs into a clay pot. As she'd worked, she couldn't resist cutting a few strands off the still steaming meat and eating them raw. Now all she needed was some fresh water and her tasks for the day would be done. She sighed, inspecting the pieces of gore still stuck to the arms of her shirt. Maybe a wash would be useful too. Ailsa picked up the empty canteen and made her way to the beach, where a stream trickled into a waterfall large and thin. The steep cliffs led to creamy sand peppered with wicked-looking boulders. The sea was as fickle as love, sometimes an azure blue, more often a choppy cold grey. Across the water lay the islands of Jay and Crate, which were clearly visible on a sunny day. Ailsa's favourite view came when the sun shone above the jagged peaks of Jay, while the beach was darkened by clouds. Ailsa had been living here long enough to know how to use the land to her advantage. She'd wandered from place to place for 5 years after she'd left her village, chased away each time, before finding her way here, a little bay far enough away from the rest of humanity for them not to bother her. No one wanted a changeling anywhere near them anyway. As she walked from the headland, the rain died down and the wind picked up, tugging at her dark hair, sending it whipping over her face like seaweed in a wave. She sighed and pulled her cloak over her head, stopping the strands from misbehaving. With her hood up, she looked just like everyone else in Neilmore, with her ash-brown hair, pale skin and silver blue eyes, save for the mark. A mark from the fairies to show she was not human. Her fingers flew to the reddened, painful-looking flesh above her eye, below her eye. It was her skin, her birthmark, that set her apart from others. Her skin that told her neighbours she was not to be trusted or tolerated. Changeling, they had shouted after her. Ailsa grimaced and continued down the path. She reached the running fountain of water, holding the canteen under the stream. Maybe I'll heat some and have a wash back at the cave, she thought absently. It was better to get most of the blood off first though. Bending to wash her hands in the ice-cold water, she rubbed them as quickly as possible. She was thinking of the tiny tin of lavender and pine soap back in her pack, stolen and saved for special occasions, when she first heard the screaming.
Cliffhanger right there. If you want to know what happens next, you have to read Stone of Destiny. Not my first rodeo. So you start with Ailsa as a Ailsa. Am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Ailsa, yeah.
Excellent. I think the only one I didn't. Yeah, I can do Alva. I think that's all right. So I'm not going to ask any more pronunciation questions. She was driven out of her original home because they thought she was a changeling. Mm-hmm. So she's very much an outsider and has had to fend for herself. What really drew you to exploring the idea that she was isolated and was driven? Was that outsider kind of an idea that you wanted to dive into originally?
Yeah, I think that a lot of fantasy books and movies, they all kind of have this really gruff male character in them who's a bit of an outsider, and I just wanted to write a female character that was like that, because you get this sort of like trope of she wasn't like girl, she wasn't the but she is. It's just that she's had a bit of a tough life, and she likes pink, and she's like can be quite romantic, but I wanted to kind of show the difference kind of throughout her journey. At the start, she's quite closed off, and yeah, like quite gruff, and used to kind of not trusting anyone. And then I think that throughout the book you kind of see that she starts to open up a little bit, and she starts to show off more the sort of person that she might have been if she hadn't been kind of cast out into society. And she also kind of grew up in a very, very small town, and throughout the book she starts to move into like the larger city, and where people are a little bit more accepting and a little bit less thinking it might be something that's bad. So the I think that the thing that drew me to a character like that was that she had the potential to change and kind of grow throughout the whole book.
Yeah, her grumpiness is great. Love it. Yeah, it's like, don't annoy her or she might throw her axe at you. Yeah. So just to double check, there are 2 characters she meets early on.
Mm-hmm.
You okay with talking about them?
Yeah, I think they're in the blurb actually. So
I always should check them. I think they're referenced, but not.
Yeah, they're within the first chapter, 2 chapters.
Oh yeah, like early on. So there is that really quite brilliant counterpoint between her and Iona, and then also Harris's disposition, which is quite funny. But yeah, in terms of that exploration of not assumed, but the typical. Is it Mel, please call me out if I'm phrasing this incorrectly. Not typical gender roles, but the gender roles you tend to see with female behavior or male behavior. Iona is one example, but then it's quite nice that the 2 women really like each other, but they obviously have, they go about their days in a very, very different way.
Yeah, and I wanted to, I guess, show some different sides of male and female characters, because like I was saying, you've got the very gruff male character, and I'm thinking of I've only seen the TV show, but The Witcher, and yeah, and then I've read a lot of Sarah J. Maas as well, and so there's all these tough male characters, whereas Ailsa's kind of that, but then you have to have a bit of a fun character who doesn't take things so seriously, but is still a really integral part of the journey, and it's kind of again, sometimes you do get those characters, but they're maybe not the main characters, whereas I think Harris is definitely one of the kind of 4 main characters in the book. He's the kind of comic relief. And I just wanted to give him, he's kind of based on Fred and George Weasley from Harry Potter. He's quite a little bit sneaky, but is just doing it and with all the best intentions.
And I think what you were saying before about over the course of novels, she starts to grow into the person she could have been. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is that something about, you see how Iona and Harris behave, and of course they've had a lot more practice at it, but they're so entirely sure of who they are and what they want and how they're going to behave. She has to first of all try to understand that. She's like, why is he doing this? Oh, that's just him. That's just what he does. And it's that whole that development of self-identity, which is really nice. So continuing on with the idea of I suppose character growth and exploration, Phil Noah goes on quite a journey, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, as I said at the beginning, that there was a bullying incident at his boarding school. Funny enough, I went to a boarding school myself in the 1960s, and I do kind of think that I wouldn't have become a writer if it hadn't been for that, because it was an appalling, grim place, and lots of the punishers basically were being beaten with a stick. So that sort of sense of escape. I mean, I started spending a lot of time in the library and reading books, actually, and Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury is the book that made me think, this is what I want to do with my life. I was probably 13 years old then. Luckily, I had a captive audience, all the boys in the dormitory at night who were bored out of their minds and would listen to, by torchlight, to me reading chapters and short stories and so forth. And I must have been really stubborn about it. I just thought, this is what I'm going to do and nothing will deter me. And it probably took me, 10 years to get to the point where I could sell a book, because as we all know, writing, it's a little bit like a long process. You have to go, you have to write a bad book in order to learn to write a better book, in order to write the one that's good enough to be published. I think that's endemic. And so Noah, in many ways, there are parts of Noah that are very like me. I mean, often I don't always do this with characters, but sometimes the bullying incident that causes his fear of the water is something that actually happened to me in that boarding school. So that was very easy to use that as this point, this stepping off point, if you like, about a boy being forced to dive into a pool of water when he's terrified to do it, by a bullying, not by the other kids, but by one of his teachers, because they were the biggest bullies in the school. They were awful people. I sometimes, I mean, they're probably all long dead now, but I'd love to sort of send them a copy and say, this is you, mate. You did this. But by the by.
Don't do anything to me or I'll write you in my next book, you know. Yeah,
I've actually got one of those t-shirts, actually. Somebody bought for me. But so, yes, and of course, although there's lots of sort of folklore mixed into the story, and there's a ghost, this is a Danny Weston book. I like to have a supernatural quality to the book. I think more than anything else, it's a story about courage. It's about finding your courage to overcome the thing that really, really freaks you out more than anything else. And as I say, in this case, here's a boy who's completely surrounded by water. The only way to get off that island, seek help, will be to swim more than a mile. And, you know, I thought if I can bring that element into it, I think that in many ways is the most important part of the story.
Would you mind giving us a little sample?
Not a problem. I'm going to start at the very beginning.
So there are some beautiful illustrations in this as well.
Chapter 1, The Boat. Noah stood on the wooden jet of early morning. He stared pensively across the vast stretch of flat grey water to the distant smudge on the horizon that Mr. Morrison had just pointed out as their eventual destination.
Oh, sorry.
Noah pulled the canvas life jacket tighter around him. Yeah. Hold on, we have an incident.
Sorry.
We can edit this out. My assistant is going to bring in the post.
Pause, and then I'll let Anna know.
This is a sign on the door saying, do not ring the doorbell. We're in a Zoom meeting. Yeah.
If that's an Amazon delivery, that's fine.
I'm not sure what it is. Oh, yeah, no, it's more important than that.
Oh.
It's wine.
Oh, that's really important.
That's actually important. I think Anne won't mind having to edit that bit out.
Yeah, so I'll start again in a minute as soon as
yes,
we've got close. All right.
Give me a second. I'll be a quick second.
Yeah, no worries.
You've already got me completely not knowing which question to ask. Caroline, can I just ask, is Son of Destiny your debut novel?
Mm-hmm.
And is that the first novel that you tried to write?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's very nice. I think that's
first thing I ever wrote, so I hope that is like okay.
Yeah. Because I'm not saying that's most people's experience, isn't it? You know.
Is it?
And I'm sure you weren't 13 years old when you started writing that.
No.
There you go. And maybe I should have made that point clear. I was 13, thinking I shall be a writer, and just thinking I could do it, doing it until finally. Right, I think we're back to normal.
Yes.
Shall I start again?
Please do.
Chapter 1, The Boat. Noah stood on the wooden jetty in the chill light of early morning. He stared apprehensively across the vast stretch of flat grey water to the distant smudge on the horizon that Mr. Morrison had just pointed out as their eventual destination. Noah pulled the canvas life jacket tighter around him and tried not to tremble. He didn't want the old man to know how scared he was, but realised it was probably all too obvious. It clung to him like a bad smell, like an ill-fitting suit of clothes that he could never remove, no matter how hard he tried. Mr. Morrison sat in the wooden dinghy, smiling encouragingly up at Noah. The boat was already piled high with all the equipment that Millicent had insisted on bringing with them, and she was still in the house, selecting the last few items that she couldn't bear to be parted from, even for a couple of weeks. Noah couldn't believe she was planning on bringing out yet more things. Didn't she realise how dangerous it was to overload a boat? Didn't she know how deep the Firth of Forth actually was? Not a good sailor then, observed Mr. Morrison in his slow Scottish lilt. Despite the name, he added under his breath, and Noah winced, already too familiar with the joke, or at least variations on it. He'd heard them so many times back at his last boarding school. Noah, who's afraid of the water, they used to whisper, just loud enough for him to hear, was one of his main reasons for leaving the place. Well, that's good anyway, added Mr. Morrison. Should be a nice, calm crossing. That's always a blessing. He leaned over the side of the boat and spat into the water. He was old and grey-whiskered, his scrawny body encased in a voluminous khaki duffel coat. A woolly hat was pulled down to just above his piercing blue eyes. He claimed to be an experienced sailor. That's what he told Millicent anyway, but Noah was far from convinced. People in the local village, he thought, would claim just about anything if they thought it was an easy way of earning a few extra pounds. But whatever Mr. Morrison had told Millicent about his abilities on the water, she booked him for the trip and paid up front in hard cash. Now here he sat in a boat that looked decrepit enough to fall to pieces at any moment. He studied the floating speck of phlegm he'd just expelled, as though trying to spot a hidden message in it. Then he turned back to study Noah, who thought he detected a hint of malice in the old man's gaze as he said, well, you may as well climb aboard now, if you're ready. And suddenly, Noah was back at the school, standing on the high diving board and staring down at the blue water of the swimming pool below him, while Mr. Greer, the PT instructor, glared up at him, no doubt wondering what was taking so long. Noah's grinning classmates clustered around Mr. Greer, enjoying the moment. Well, come on, boy, what are you waiting for? It's quite simple. Put your blessed head down and dive. So I'll leave it there.
I thought your accent was very good.
Oh, thank you. You have to say that, really.
It was very good. I was back in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Where I lived for 6 lovely years.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah. You know, it was very good accent, and it very much kind of takes you to that particular part of Scotland as well. So I know that you reference Millicent in that first chapter, that we meet her a little bit later on. You explore to a certain degree the relationship between Noah and Millicent, and they have quite a unique mother-son relationship. Where did that really come from, and what were your kind of thoughts about it?
I get it. Noah is adopted, and there's never been any sort of hiding that fact. They've been quite open with him. You were adopted. We thought about having other kids, but you were enough. So Millicent, I think, is very much based. She's an Enid Blyton character. She's Enid Blyton, the author. You know, she is a children's author herself. She writes these books about the adventurers who go off to islands and solve mysteries and go into deserted lighthouses and so forth. And Noah's gone past the age where he enjoyed those. He now thinks they're a bit formulaic, and this absolutely makes Millicent furious that he doesn't still read the books. Millicent has lost her mojo. One of the reasons why she's going to the island is she wants to set a story on an island, and she can no longer just write. This is because of the death of her husband during the Second World War, Archie. So she determines that she will go, and then of course Noah returns from boarding school in disgrace. He's been a coward at boarding school. Oh, terrible, can't face the other kids and all this. And she says, well, you can come with me and be my assistant on the island. You can go out and find things for me to write about, which he is not looking forward to. And of course, he finds things on the island that are absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Be my assistant and go and find things I can write about. Yeah, they have a very specific dynamic, and I was seeing that there was a very interesting parent-child relationship as well in Hold Back the Tide. So you stay with Alva and her father right from the beginning, quite early on. We see that they live in very close quarters, and they have a very specific kind of relationship that is you don't hold back at all in terms of bringing the reader right into what's going on there.
I think it's important to state your case from the beginning. So it's one of my favourite beginnings of a story I've ever written. And it's a thing I've come to realise recently, is that you don't, when you write books, you're told all the time that you must start with the action, you must start with the action. And I think it's such a terrible thing to teach people. I think what we should be teaching people instead is that the reader needs to join the story at the last possible minute they can comfortably join without losing any kind of information. Like so many books start with fight scenes, particularly in fantasy. Like the amount of books you read that start in the middle of a fight, and I don't really care. I know who the narrator technically is, but I don't honestly care if they live or die because I know nothing about them. And so I wanted to kind of write a beginning that put you straight in the action, as it were, but also everything you need to know about Alva is illustrated in the opening chapter. In fact, it's illustrated in one particular line, and the line is...
Is this your reading? Is this it?
Oh, I mean, I could go straight in if you want.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
There is a line in it's on the very first page, and everything you need to know about how Alva deals with her life and the people in it and her attitude towards the circumstances is contained in the line, heaps of potatoes, no one ever ate 3 pounds of mash and then went on a killing spree. Which I think it's everything you need to know about her is in there, like,
yeah,
people will survive. So yeah, you do get straight into it, but because of the nature of the book, it's very important that right from that opening chapter, you know the lay of the land and how things are in her life, in her world.
Yeah. Would you maybe do a little reading to
I could
of that landscape and from the world?
I will read the entire first chapter because it is 2 pages.
There you go.
Chapter 1 of Hold Back the Tide. Here are the rules of living with a murderer. 1. Do not draw attention to yourself. It's pretty self-explanatory. If they don't notice you, they won't get any ideas about killing you. Be a ghost in your own home if that's what it takes. After all, you can't kill a ghost. Of course, when you live with a murderer, sit opposite them at every meal, share a washroom, a kitchen, and sleep a mere 12 feet and 2 flimsy walls away from them, this is impossible. Even the subtlest of spectres is bound to be noticed, which leads to the next rule, number 2. If you can't be invisible, be useful. Cook huge hearty meals that make them too full and sleepy to feel like slaughtering you. I'm talking meaty stews, thick casseroles, heaps of potatoes. No one ever ate 3 pounds of mash and then went on a killing spree. A bit of bread and hard cheese is hardly going to keep you alive. You should also keep your home spotlessly clean, get those floors swept, pillows fluffed, shine that cutlery so bright you can see your face in it. Never let them run out of fresh laundry, always sew on loose buttons before they're lost, and darn socks the moment they show any sign of wear. Be sure to collect the eggs and milk the goat each morning before sunrise, no matter the weather. It's better to be cold and damp than dead, my girl. In short, make it so your death would be very inconvenient. Murderers hate to be inconvenienced. It's still not enough, though. Not nearly enough. On to rule 3. If you can't beat them, join them. Not in murder, obviously. The last thing you want is to get into some kind of rivalry. Find some other way to be an apprentice and turn yourself into the thing they didn't know they needed. Become their right hand, so cutting you would only make them bleed. Build the stamina it takes to walk around the loch day after day, rain, snow or shine. Do it with ease and speed. Learn to set and cast the nets around the loch edges to catch the fish that live there, where to slip those fish to harvest what's in their bellies, and how to sift through your findings, panning for information like the luckless pan for gold. Then train yourself not to be sick at the sight of fish guts strewn across a table you'd spent half an hour polishing to gleaming the day before. Clean the table again. Study hard. Learn how to test the lock to make sure it's clean, how to draw the tables that predict what the water level should be, so you know at a glance how much can be used and how much should be spared. Master these calculations, be sure you can do them in your head, and keep those numbers on your tongue ready if they're ever needed. More than that, Familiarise yourselves with spears, knives and guns. Learn how to sharpen a blade on a whetstone so it stings when you slash it through the air, how to clean a barrel, oil a trigger. Practice until you can assemble a long gun in under 30 seconds. Know where the bullets and gunpowder are kept. Make sure there's always plenty. 4. Don't make them angry. In my experience, a murderer is much more likely to kill you if they're angry. And right now, my father is furious with me.
Woo! I had to leave a pause there. That was very...
A little bit of recovery time.
It's all right. I thought Phil and Karen were like, Kindle, I need to get it now.
Yeah.
It's a bargain.
Unsurprisingly, after that introduction, Vic James has been describing Hold Back the Tide as the book you were made to write. Is that right?
She has, yeah. She came to visit me back when you could do such a thing in the days of yore. And I let her read the opening chapter. I think this was even before I'd sent it to my publisher. And she was like, this is the book that's going to make you. I mean, we didn't know there was going to be a massive plague at the time, closing all the bookshops and thereby ruining any chance this book had of doing any kind of good. But my brother did point out that it, like, Circumstances mean it has the potential to become a cult classic. So 10 years from now, there will be entire, I don't know, hologram forums, like virtual reality settings where people go and talk about it together. So fingers crossed. But yeah, it's the book I'm weirdly proudest of. It's the book with the most me in it, I think.
Okay. When you say the most you in it, do you mean that in terms of Alva or just lots of little things? Not
in terms of Alva, just in terms of me. It's hard. Like it's me distilled into 200 odd pages.
Okay. I think I can see what you mean by that. I think it's fair to say that all three of your stories have a mystery at the center of them. They're all built on that principle that things are not quite what they seem. When you are setting up a story with a particular mystery at its heart, how did you each go about it to make sure that you yourself were, I suppose, feeding the reader the right little bits along the way, but then also making sure that you were happy with how it all came together at the end? Maybe Caroline, with Stone of Destiny, we follow our characters on a long journey.
Yeah, so I guess the kind of the main almost a mystery that's kind of going through it is where is Stone of Destiny?
Mysteries, haven't you?
Yeah. But this is part of the blurb, so again, it's not kind of spoiling anything. But I guess the kind of main thing is that throughout Ailsa's life, she's been followed by something in the woods, and she has kind of coped with that by kind of staying away from the forest. But because she's been kind of thrown into this quest, she's had to kind of again, and then it's kind of the mystery is what is it, and you know, is it bad, this thing that's following her, and because she's kind of met a lot more mythical sort of creatures, they can give her a bit more insight into it, and you know, we've been talking about having a fear of lochs and deep water, and it's kind of the same thing for Ailsa, so she's kind of trying to combat that as she's going, which I think is helping again to make her character grow. She's been hiding from this for so long, and now she's having to kind of confront it.
Because she's actually with other people for
yeah.
Because if it's her, she'd be like, I'm just going to run away from the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phil, there's Noah obviously has his fear of water, but there's a lot more possibly, or is there, going on the island? So, you know, where did that obviously there was the inspiration on the train, and the different stories of how you found out in terms of Scottish history. Was that always the end point? for you?
Yeah, there is a sense of mystery in the book, and the main mystery revolves around on the island are the remains of an old leper hospital, and that hospital has left something very important. I don't want to say too much because we get rounds of spoilers, but the whole premise of the hospital, the way that it was set up, what it stood for, is bogus, and Noah discovers, as the story unfolds, that what happened in the hospital was quite horrible, and it was merely somebody making money from the predicament of others in this awful thing, the contagion, as it was known. And it's how that is revealed to him. But I was going to say that I think a sense of mystery is endemic to nearly every book that's written. If there is no mystery in that story somewhere, what is going to keep people reading? You lure them in and you promise them that somewhere down towards the end of the book they will find out, they will solve this riddle, if you like, that's been mentioned here and mentioned there and reflected here and reflected there. But by the end of the book, I think it's really important, unless of course it's a series and you're going to hold it out to the very last in the series, but I think if I come away from a book and that hasn't been revealed by the end, I'll think, oh, I'm annoyed. I wish I wanted to find out about that. So, yeah, I think mystery is so important.
Yeah. Mel, you're quite fond of a mystery.
Love a mystery, yeah, love it.
Love it. I suppose with Hold Back the Tide, not wanting to necessarily draw comparisons with your previous novels, but it's a smaller community. I don't want to say it's necessarily a smaller mystery, but compared to State of Sorrow and The Sin Eater's Daughter, we're moving through multiple worlds and multiple lands and kings and queens, and there is a kind of, when there are, I don't know, if there are fewer people, do you feel that there is more or less at stake?
I think more in a small community, and I think that's because everyone is so much more knitted into each other's lives. Like if in previous books I've written, I always write twisty books with lots of mysteries, but when you write those, you're writing at kind of state level, and so the little people, I guess, are quite removed from the situation, and it all becomes about the big players on the chessboard, your bishops and your kings and your queens and your castles. And I wanted to write something, I wanted to explore something that felt like a mystery I am more likely to be part of, which is a mystery in a smaller setting. And I think maybe people who live in smaller settings have more mystery because they are less likely to be under the kind of scrutiny that leaders and politicians are under. But I wanted to write something smaller because I felt like those kind of mysteries can tear things apart irrevocably. Like things that happen on a grand scale are terrible, but by and large the effects that happen to people are the ones that trickle down, whereas things that are more localized, the impact is huge and immediate and devastating and not necessarily so easy to kind of recoup from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm trying to remember, I think in State of Sorrow there's a point where you describe the main character and she's traveling for the first time, and then she's beginning to realize about travel and her duty as the future leader to like maintain the roads, and then she's seeing the people for the first time. She's like, oh, and then it becomes this idea of like, I must champion the people, but she doesn't even know what the people want. So fun little mention for State of Sorrow there, everyone.
On Kindle, sadly not.
Yeah.
The problem was I bought all of the Senator's Daughter series on the Kindle, and then I had to buy them on like the paperback. They're in school at the moment because the kids, I have like a little library, but I can't get them.
Well, thank you for buying them anyway.
Yeah.
No, I do that too. It's like I'll get an ebook and see if I like it, and then if I really do, I'm like, oh, I'll get the.
I do it with new authors a lot. If I'm not sure if I'm going to love it, or if it's a kind of new genre, or if it's a new area of reading for me, I'll have a little go on ebook first, and then usually then go on to buy the hardback and then the paperback and then the audiobook and then subscribe to all of the authors' channels and kind of fantasize about becoming their friend and how I could engineer such a situation, and then how awkward I am socially and how I'm not very good at making friends because I'm not good at people.
I think that that's just like an
whole
awful
journey.
Mel's internal monologue there. Thank you very much. So if anyone in our audience is interested in picking up Stone Destiny or Inchin Island of Sorrows, its full title, Hold Back the Tide, there are links on the Cymera Festival website to Blackwell's bookshop in Edinburgh, which does do UK-wide shipping. If you would also like to support different local bookshops, you can also do hive.co.uk. Book Depository also ships internationally. Please do try to support your local independent bookshop during this trying time, because you know what? We want that particular industry to keep going. We have, unfortunately, come to our time. We could probably keep going. I mean, I do have lots more questions, but you know, we all have busy lives to get back to. We all need to keep writing your next novels. So just to say thank you so much for joining me and for being part of Cymera Festival Online for 2020. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading all of your books. So thank you so much. And I wish you all the best with all of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.